Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode.
Now, one special swing of David Beckham's right foot can put everything right. Perfect free kick from David Beckham, beating a keeper who looked unbeatable last week. And within a minute of falling behind, Beckham equalises for Manchester United. He couldn't quite reach it.
Manchester United were stunned, and the football world was stunned when Sir Alex Ferguson decided and announced that 01-02 was going to be his last. He's going to finish up. His contract ran out then. This was going to be the end. Quite a few things going on in his head, David. He said in his book years later, wasn't sure if he could do it again, win that second European Cup, that magic of Barcelona that night. He found it hard to kind of go again. He wasn't impressed. He did a thing with Martin Edwards, who was obviously the chairman at the time, and someone had asked, "Look, what will you do if and when Alex decides to go?" He said, "Well, we don't want another Matt Busby situation," meaning Ferguson being a director, hanging about the club, interfering, unable to help himself, basically. And Ferguson wasn't really impressed with that. And this spectre of being a Busby, there too long, overstaying a welcome. And he was 60, he was going to be 60 on New Year's Eve of 2001. He just felt, you know what, 60's time. 60, you feel 60, my goodness, you feel old. 50, you feel you're just halfway there. And a kind of coalescence, really, of those three reasons made him decide enough was enough. That was his book, David. Anyone's watched the brilliant Amazon 3-part documentary on United 99 knows that it could well have ended that season as well. They were not overly happy with some of his other interests, especially horse racing, and my word, that interest in horse racing would have mammoth consequences for United down the years. But this was a shock.
Seismic, really was. I mean, it was enormous, and you just couldn't really. They had been the team of the 90s, Manchester United in England, in the way that Liverpool were the team of the 80s. And you just couldn't see a Manchester United really without him, because a successful one hadn't existed in my lifetime anyway. And he had been just so much the face of it. Yes, there were these wonderful players, but Alex Ferguson, to use one of your phrases, Martin, bestrode that club like a colossus. I don't think he ever quite felt valued enough. It's a running theme in his books, written at various stages of his careers. I don't think he ever.
I'll put it out there, David. I shall suggest that people that achieve greatness never ever feel that they've got enough love and enough praise. It's never enough, and it fuels that fire for more and more and more. Ferguson often gave the impression of getting up early just to be angry, practice being angry. He needed that, and he absolutely felt he wasn't given enough love.
Yeah, I think as well that the Hampden thing was huge, Martin, because it just seemed to be so perfect. And here is a man who has written his own scripts in the past, and I will sign off with victory at Hampden Park. I'll be my second European Cup at Scotland. Everything seemed to be pointing to that. But I get the impression, and I kind of got it at the time too, that I think he was looking for a little bit of love, a little bit of, right, let's see the reaction to this. And of course, he speaks about his wife saying, look, you're too young to do this. I don't want you in under my feet all day. But I do think that in the back of his mind, he's like, right, okay, let's see how they react to this. And I just remember, as a supporter of a football fan, not a Manchester United supporter, it just feeling enormous and a real sense of, well, what comes next? a feeling that I remember very, very strongly when it was announced he actually was leaving. Remember 2013?
Yeah, 2013, yeah.
But that one was at least a bit more understandable because of his age. There hadn't been any indication that he was slowing down or he was unhealthy or he was bored.
Healthy, perfect.
Yeah,
Health. That wasn't an issue.
He hadn't looked like you thought, right, he's getting to the end. And I think we've even seen with some modern managers, Jurgen Klopp, you could look at him and you say, that there is a gentleman who looks knackered. You know, this job is aging him. You can see that. But with Ferguson, I was shocked. There was this, well, what will follow? Wenger was, really in his pomp at this point. Will Arsenal come through now? And I had only grown up, Martin, with in the 80s, there was Liverpool. In the 90s, there was Manchester United. Will this be Arsenal's decade?
Yeah, exactly. What does the 2000s have in store? I mean, the Hampden thing, you're absolutely right. There was a piece, I'm sure it was in the Sunday Mail at the start of that season, writing this all out. He's going to go back and he's going to finish off with the Champions League against Real Madrid. Very nearly happened, of course, at Hampden, where he, as a boy, stood watching Real Madrid win the European Cup back in 1960. Blah 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 blah. And United, they faltered. They faltered a lot in the early part of that season. He says the players just weren't sharp enough. He was the man who kept everyone on their toes. The scouts and those guys just weren't looking. It wasn't fired up really. And it was Christmas Day, actually, he writes, that his wife and 3 boys basically said, this is silly. You need, and he was very close, because I think when he went back to United to say, I've changed my mind, they were literally going to speak to Sven, who was the guru at the time, Adam, of new coaching, because of the success he was having with England. 5-1 in Munich had happened by that point. And after the World Cup, he was going to go to United. Adam, they had spent money, which they only do every few years, on Ruud van Nistelrooy, who was supposed to come the summer before. He crunched his knee, and they waited. To be fair, they honoured the deal, and he came from PSV in the summer of 2001. And this weird signing of Seba Verón from Lazio, that, I mean, brilliant player, phenomenal player. Not sure where that was really going to fit in that United team. He sold Stam, which he probably the only sale that he admits is a mistake. But what he cannot find for love nor money is a goalkeeper. They've kind of, after Schmeichel left, they've kind of gone through them all, and it's been a bit of a disaster, really. Fabian Barthez, I think, currently holding kind of comical gloves at the moment. Your thoughts on that United kind of set up at that moment, especially Verón?
Yeah, it's one of those things, I guess, that showed the differences between Serie A and the Premier League at that time. I know everybody's advancing quite well, sports science, tactics, all that sort of stuff, but putting a player in there like Verón into a 4-4-2 British midfield, I think, is just never going to really work at that point. And I think that's one of those things that has to go as a black mark, I think, against Ferguson, because for me, if you're bringing in someone like that, who's one of the best centre midfielders in the world, but certainly in the most dominant league, then you need to be adapting. You can't just be throwing them in and saying, right, on you go, do what we want you to do rather than do what you do. So I think there's an element of that. Right player, wrong time, wrong movie, etc. For me, there's an interesting couple of crossovers though, because Capello, I was reading something earlier on, Capello was quite heavily linked as well, wasn't he, with with the job? And there was all sorts of chat.
We said last week, Adam, at Hitsfield for years was, because David has rightly said, what's next? The press have been asking what's next for a while, because even by 2001, Adam, someone being in a job for 14 years at this point, 15 years, I mean, this is now becoming odd. It's becoming unheard of. Who is going to be next? And yeah, everyone was getting quoted, but Sven was very much down the line.
Do you know the thing that annoys me about that is what's coming next? No one seems to do anything about it. Like in these sorts in these situations, we've had the same things before with Smith leaving. I know it's different because we had Advocate coming in, but for Ferguson, what's coming next? We're not sure. And you mentioned that everybody was beholden to him. I think that's fine, but it's tricky when you're in it, and it was the same the way that it went with Wenger at the end. But it really needs someone there to say, "Well, this
We'll
isn't
tell you
lasting
first.
forever. We
Yeah.
can't all rely on this one guy to do everything." And we see it now as well. We're desperate at Rangers for a manager to come in and just restructure the whole club. I know Gerrard moved it forward and did all that sort of stuff, and everybody was beholden to him. We've seen some things there that maybe they shouldn't have been. Maybe we should have sold players. Maybe this should have happened. Maybe that should have happened. And I just don't think it's healthy. But it's just so tricky when you're in the middle of such ridiculous success to have somebody there to go, hang on a minute, should we think about succession planning here? Should we think maybe we don't spend that amount of money on this player? Yeah.
See on that, Adam, I think that when clubs say, "Oh, we're aware that at any point a manager, if it's a smaller club, a manager could be taken away, or so we plan for the future." No, you don't. You clearly don't. That's a lie. It's one of the biggest lies in football. I would point at Manchester United's post-Ferguson thing. They had the idea to go for Moyes. It was wrong. A year later, they have missed the boat on a couple of managers who have gone elsewhere that summer. They're left with getting Louis van Gaal. Now, Louis van Gaal, great manager, but at that time shouldn't have been anywhere near the Manchester United job. A couple of years later, they have to go for Jose Mourinho. Well, that's completely different from what you went for 2 years ago with Louis van Gaal. And I think that there is this sort of myth that clubs say, right, we know exactly what we want. How often do a club bring in somebody who is tactically really similar to, in Britain anyway? Maybe abroad they do it a wee bit more, where tactics are discussed a wee bit more openly and whatnot. But a lot of the time in Britain, the qualification for bringing in a new coach was he successful? And if the answer is yes, people don't look deeper and say, like bringing in Moyes was hired because Ferguson liked him and he was Scottish.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Brighton of the club.
Yeah, the football.
We need continuity. We need the same kind of manager, because this is how we are. This is our identity. We are never going to be challenging for this, and this. But we do not want to be yo-yoing around leagues. We don't want to be an utter financial meltdown. This is who we're going to be, and there'll be obviously slight difference between Potter and De Zerbi, but it's the same. It's the same kind of pathway. But you're absolutely right, David. Big clubs are they're defined by trophies, so that's the only thing that matters. All of this is just marketing.
You're right, because there's nobody sitting. I mean, there's nobody sitting doing it there anyway, because he'd obviously run the full show for, well, at this point, what we are, 16 years. 16 years he's been there. But when was that FA Cup that he could have got sacked? Like 89-ish? 1990. So from then on, so 10, 12 years of basically, I'm the man. I guess it is just one of those things. Everybody just says, right, well, he'll deal with it, and then he goes and picks somebody who, I mean, you can be the best coach in the world, and you can be the best manager, and you can get players in a room and get them to play for you, but it doesn't mean you know how to pick your successor.
If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts, and breakdowns dropping every other day.